Welcome everybody, my name is Mikey Mhenna. Today is part of our broader conversation series, but this is going to follow a format that is new to Africa called Outline, which I'll explain in a little bit. Our special guests are Nouf and Rawdha Mansoori, both who are a part of the NYU Abu Dhabi Citizen Researcher Project based in Abu Dhabi. Rawdha, Nouf, thank you so much for joining Africa's Outline conversation.
Thank you for having us, Mikey. We're excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. So I'm going to read a little bit about what this project is and why we were so excited to feature it on the series. And I'll have you sort of chime in. So it says, citizen researcher, for those of you who can't see the screen, citizen researcher invites members of the public to participate in and contribute to ongoing research. Within citizen researcher, members of the public can gain new research skills from their participation, and research studies reach their goals at a much faster rate thanks to participant contribution. Most importantly, citizen researcher removes the barrier that research can only be done by professionals. It proves that anyone with the passion and curiosity to learn and discover can take part in this research. Okay, what does that paragraph miss? So Nouf, let's start with you. Just what do you think is not included in that paragraph, and what do you think people misunderstand about a citizen researcher off the jump?
Okay, so I think part of the not the problem, but maybe potentially the misunderstanding, a citizen researcher is there aren't many programs like them in the country. It's a program that's inspired by citizen science projects. Citizen science projects people are a lot more familiar with. So those who have probably participated in citizen science projects or are familiar with it, then there wouldn't be that much confusion. The only difference between citizen researcher and citizen science is that we're trying to be a lot more inclusive with citizen researcher and include other disciplines. I think what we anticipate in terms of the kind of misunderstandings is that some people who participate, citizen researchers, might think that they have to be human subjects in the research itself, and that's not the case with this. What we're trying to accomplish here is basically giving them the opportunity to become amateur researchers, to actually work with the researchers in the, and feed their curiosity and kind of contribute to discovery and breakthroughs. So I think that's probably the main misunderstanding that might or might not happen. Yeah.
Okay, let's watch a little bit of this 1-minute video, and then we're going to get through the sort of the Africa outline questions that I think will be fun to sort of map this project from before to after. Okay, so let's listen to a little bit of this.
The Citizen Researcher Initiative is a program that was developed with the idea of involving the public in the research that we're doing by giving them the opportunity to become researchers themselves.
When we connect researchers and general public in a citizen research program, we can create a very powerful source of knowledge.
They can help by data collection, by data analysis. They can feed their curiosity and their love for knowledge and discovery. If you'd like to learn more about our Citizen Researcher program and play a role in making an impact on ongoing research, please register with us on our website and start your Citizen Researcher journey today.
Great. Okay, cool. So, all right. So I want to talk about this logo. All right. And before we get into some of the questions, why are there 5 boxes in this logo, and what are these 5 different things?
Do you mean boxes isn't in the C, or boxes is in the 5 different?
In the C. Yeah.
The C, that was cool. Yeah, that was a coincidence. That wasn't deliberate at all. So when we were actually thinking of coming up with the logo, one of the things that was interesting is, so we put it out and we actually asked a couple of friends, because we had some prototypes that were presented to us, and every single prototype that came back to us, because it literally, when someone says citizen, the first thing you think about are people. So every single logo that came back looked like a bathroom, like a restroom sign, a logo in a restroom. And we're like, that's not what we're doing. So So we decided we're just going to go simple with it and go with the C for citizen researcher. But the reason we went with the that's a hexagon, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, the hexagon shape. And is because we actually thought about the citizen researcher project as a sort of hive, like and it's the same thing, like using the metaphor of hives and bees and how we work collaboratively together. But good eye, we did not notice that there were 5 boxes. So maybe we need to actually create another. I'm going to have to think of another story for this next time.
Okay. But there is something to this because you guys are working with all these different centers.
Yes.
And so can you just walk us through what are some of the centers?
So we're part of New York University, and New York University is a liberal arts university, and we have 5 different disciplines across, across academic and the research fields. So we've got the arts, engineering, science, social science, and humanities, and all of them. We've got within the research landscape in NYU, we've got institutes that are multidisciplinary that include all of the 5 that we've got different disciplines that work together. But we have some research that's also done in disciplinary fashions within, across faculty centers as well as the institute itself.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to go through. The way this outline works is that there's a before, during, and after. And the idea is that we're trying to really map out the idea of a project to the outcome of the project. So I'm going to go through a bunch of questions, and let's start with Rawdha. How about you? Let's start with you on this question. What were you doing before you and Nouf started working on this project?
So with Citizen Researcher, it's been several years that we've been working on this project. So I think we really started seriously working on Citizen Researcher around 2018. And the way we do things in our department is that we shift our focus from one project to the next. So whenever we're not focused on Citizen Researcher, there are other things that we're working on, other initiatives and programs. So some of the things that we're working on as well is we would collaborate. So a lot of our work is collaborating with NYUAD faculty and researchers. And some of the ways that we collaborate with them is that we develop educational workshops for school students. So sometimes faculty and researchers would come to us with this idea to develop an educational workshop. And what we would do is that we'd facilitate contacts with them for high schools or other schools. And we'd basically be the intermediary where we'd connect them with each other. So with the faculty or the researcher who's interested in developing or delivering the educational content, we'd connect them with the schools. We used to do this ad hoc, which means that basically whenever a researcher or a faculty member would be interested in delivering educational content, they'd come up to us. But eventually we wanted to kind of make something that's more fixed or more of a program. So we've developed a workshop called STEAM Investigators, where we'd actually have and I should probably have mentioned this, but most of our work is related to STEAM disciplines. So sciences, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And so with STEAM investigators, we're actually creating a narrative and a storyline where a mysterious occurrence has occurred, and we'd ask students to kind of go through a STEAM-related process where they'd solve the narrative or the storyline, and they'd solve it using STEAM-related techniques, STEAM-related principles to kind of solve the storyline. So that's one thing we're working on interchangeably with Citizen Researcher.
So those are high school students?
It depends on the content itself. So the content would kind of inform what target group we'd target, whether that's middle school or high school, or sometimes we'd pick a high school, and so that would inform the content as well.
Okay, interesting. So what was the first version of the name of this project? Did you take Citizen Researcher from a broader NYU global initiative? Is this exclusively an NYUAD initiative? Was it ever thought to be something else besides this precise version? Nouf, maybe you can speak to that.
This is just a purely NYUAD version. I mean, NYU New York has science communicator programs as well, and they do a lot of science communicator workshops as well. But Citizen Researchers specifically, we use the terms, I don't want to say we coined it, because I think there are some people that identify as citizen researchers, but there isn't an actual unified program, at least as far as we know here in the country, that does that. And initially, we actually used to call it citizen science because that's what people related to. But then we realized that the more we started, when we were doing our, we were having conversations with the faculty, and we were actually looking at the landscape of research in NYU, we saw that there were so many other opportunities in, like in the humanities and social sciences, where we could actually start adapting some of that research and finding ways to get the public to participate in. And that's kind of how the inception of citizen researchers started.
Is there something about, I mean, the word citizen is a very specific word. Is there something about like civic action that you're interested in, sort of concerned with?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll speak for myself, and I think Rawdha might agree with this as well. I mean, I'm a scientist by trade. My background is in genetics and biology, and I've kind of got to know the world of science communication and citizen science pretty late in my career. And it was through meeting people in different countries in the US and the UK. I used to go to a lot of workshops, and I found that it was the one common language that everyone understood. And I really do believe that science can create equality and can bring people together and promote social justice in many areas. And I like the word citizen because of that. I feel like it invokes that kind of responsibility to just do good, and to be involved in promoting social justice in different areas, I guess. But I guess the other thing is, I think the word citizen right now is used very quite commonly in many other areas as well. And I think it's the one word that everyone, as global citizens, everyone relates to and everyone connects to, I guess, in one way or the other.
Okay. All right, let's keep going. So yeah, this question is, when did this project actually start? Not when did you make the logo, when did you put up the website? What actually spurred this starting? When did you first start realizing that there was a problem that needed fixing?
So the thing is, it wasn't that we realized there was a problem that needed fixing. This actually started, I mean, for me, the first conversation around citizen researcher, it wasn't even called citizen researcher, was around 2016. So I joined NYU around, I think 2015, just a year before that. And I used to go to a lot of science communication conferences abroad. And I started, of course, being involved in a lot of citizen science projects or citizen science communities. And I started having this conversation with my boss at the time in the university. And I used to ask this question. I'm like, how is it that we don't have something similar here? It seems such an intuitive idea. It doesn't seem like it's revolutionary in any way. It doesn't seem like it's out of the box. So the conversation started then. But of course, we had a lot of other priorities. Like Rawdha mentioned earlier, we were already involved in doing a lot of public engagement workshops. We were working with primary and secondary education engagement and developing workshops to complement curriculums in school. We were also getting involved in local government events like Abu Dhabi Science Festival, Think Science. So we had a lot of it on our plate at the time. And we weren't really thinking about starting something new. Around 2017, 2018, I was put in contact with a group in London who basically used to be their group of professionals who used to work in the science museums, and they started their own startup. And what they do is they help develop exhibitions for museums, for example. So they did a lot of, they used to interpret really hard esoteric science and create exhibitions and workshops for their clients. I had a conversation with them, and we started bouncing a couple of ideas around, and they found this as a challenge because they never had to do this at a university level. They were involved in other citizen science projects, but they never had to do it at a university level, and they didn't have to think about designing programs across all disciplines because it's very easy for us to be able to think, it's been done before. So they know how to think about interpreting science programs into citizen science projects. But the challenge came with the humanities and social sciences. And then how do you make it inclusive? How do you make it interdisciplinary? And I think that's when it started, around 2018. And then we kind of rolled out our first testbed program project in 2019. We did it with a school, and it was a really nice project where we worked with we have a Center of Genomics and System Biology in the university, and they were looking into there were certain types of parasites that were affecting the crop here in the UAE. So they found a type of bacteria that's non-pathogenic, and we were basically collecting soil. We're getting students to collect soil and study the soil so we can develop biopesticides for it. And the idea was to scope it out the next year, and then the rest is history because COVID happened.
Yeah. So let's actually, I kind of want to go through the nuts and bolts of this. So sure. They're doing capital S science, right? These are real researchers who are doing genetics and are studying soil, and you are enrolling a whole host of high school students in the Emirates to go collect soil for these scientists. And how does it get back to the scientists? Is it actually used, or is it just like,
No, it's actually used. Yeah, so what we did, so this is what was interesting, and that's the thing. So the thing about science, like just doing research in science, and I think that also applies to other disciplines, is people seem to think that it's so complicated, so like it's a completely different world. But really the process for it is like anything else. As a child, like if you think about yourself before you were introduced to labels like science, like biology and physics and all of that, you went out and you played, you looked at soil, you looked at worms, you were curious about beetles and butterflies. You probably, some of us used to take wings, that's such a horrid image, but like tear wings apart in crickets. I remember that. Like I remember a lot of my friends doing that. So that part I think we keep forgetting about. And that's the start of any kind of discovery. Like that's the start of curiosity. So with the high school students, it was the same thing. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about us trying to explain a complicated theory or a complicated concept to them. It's about what part, no matter how small it is, can you play in contributing to the advancement of research. And the simplest thing from a researcher's perspective, the simplest thing you as a citizen can do is help them collect data. And I think that's basically how we were trying to sell it, is so instead of just going out and trying to, discover things on your own, we're giving you we're telling you why you're doing it. And we're telling you what kind of impact it has. And it wasn't that difficult. We thought it would be a lot more difficult to try and explain that concept to them. But they got it very quickly. And I think, I would credit our faculty for that as well. They did a great job explaining that.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're going to keep on going. So we kind of talked about this, but just reframing this a little bit. Rawdha, how quickly were you involved in, let me reframe this a little bit. Did you believe in this idea from the jump? Or were you like, I don't think this is going to work?
So I came around 2018 when it moved from it being a conceptual to something that we started implementing. And from the very beginning, I liked the idea of public participation in research. And again, like as we got into this whole program, we of course learned about citizen science as well, which is one of the things that inspired our initiative is this global movement called citizen science. So we immediately got exposed to the literature, to the studies, and to the projects that were already available in citizen science. And so one of the first things we did with citizen researchers is that we teamed up with a content development team called Talents KCA. And I know Nouf can speak about this at length as well, where they had us develop our content for citizen researcher. And one of the things that they did is that they had this engagement week at the NYUAD campus, where one of the first things that we did is that we reached out to faculty and researchers to tell them about citizen science. And it was in the form of presentations, in the form of talks. And so in terms of believing in it, I think it was very easy to kind of become very interested in it because of this concept of involving people in the research process and removing this barrier that only research can be conducted in professional settings and by professional researchers, when that is not really the case. You would see in the typical research team that they're actually limited in terms of staff and resources, and that they would actually benefit from a large group of people participating in the research process that would help them accelerate their research or help them reach solutions to their problems at a much quicker rate. So you have this component of the mutual benefit with citizen science, and now that's what we're trying to do with citizen researcher as well. This drive this idea that there is a mutual benefit. Not only are participants learning the research process, and not only are they empowered by learning the research process, but their contribution is actually positively impacting the research, where we see a rise in data collection, a rise in data analysis. And so as a result, participants' contribution actually benefit the research and help accelerate it. So just reading about that and this vision of implementing that here in the UAE and potentially seeing this grow is something that was inspiring, and I immediately jumped in and was very excited about.
Cool.
I have to add though, Mikey, I have to add one thing. Rawdha doesn't have a science background, and this is what's amazing about this whole thing. Like, she's leading a project that's supposed to be trying to encourage. I hear her talk about this right now, and we were looking, I'm looking at the question. It says what's your, when did you have that light bulb moment? And Rawdha and I were talking about this, trying to figure out when did that happen? When did we get that epiphany? And to me, I can't think of this as a light bulb. This is more like a dimmer switch, because it just kept getting, it's like a never ending dimmer switch, just got brighter and brighter. So it's just, I wanted to point that out, that, you don't have to have the background. And I think that just the whole concept of bringing people together to do something good, regardless of what that is I think what the buy-in that people are looking for. But yeah.
Okay, so this question is probably one of my favorite questions in the questionnaire, which is, who are some of the unlisted co-founders that are informing your work, whether you've met them or not? But who do you think, if you actually think about the folks that are influencing the structure of this, the design of the citizen researcher, the purpose, the mission, who are some of the sort of people whose DNA is all over this program, whether they know it or not? Nouf, go for it.
Should I go? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So I keep thinking about the people that I got inspired by that are doing something similar like that. So it might not be people around me, but I grew up listening or watching or listening to podcasts and watching Neil deGrasse Tyson talk the way that he does. So I think I would credit him to be one of the co-founders of an initiative like that. There are people like Dr. Karen Cooper, who is a huge proponent for citizen science, and her passion, the way that the metaphors and the analogies that she uses to try and promote. So those are people that aren't people that we've met, but they're around, but I feel like they influence a lot of the work that they're doing. I don't know, Rawdha, if you had anyone in mind as well.
I had one person as well. I would mention a professor called, I believe, if I'm saying his name correctly, is Mookie Haklai. He really helped inform the way we approach citizen researcher projects. So after we trialed one of the projects for the one Nouf mentioned, Bug Fighter, where we had to collect soil samples, we noticed that some of the data that the student collected unfortunately, we weren't able to use it towards the research study. Some of their data that they collected and the data they analyzed, we weren't able to use it towards the research study. And so we realized that one of the things that we needed to do next time is to make sure the process itself is studied and developed in a way where people who contribute their data analysis or their data collection we would be able to use it towards the research study. So Mookie Haklai comes in because he actually created this free online course for anyone who's interested in developing a citizen science project, or for anyone who's interested in learning more. I was muted the whole time.
Sorry. Yeah. If you just say that last point, for anyone who no, you were muted the whole time, just that last sentence.
Okay.
For anyone who is interested in, say that last sentence.
For anyone who is interested in developing a citizen science projects or in learning more about citizen science projects, so he developed that online course.
Okay.
And so basically he kind of developed this foundation and this framework to make sure that the process itself, when developing a citizen science project, that there are ways where you would ensure that the data that's contributed by participants can be used towards the research study. So
Okay.
you think about that before actually launching the project.
Okay. So I actually want to jump into the implementation, and then if we have time at the end, we'll come back to some of these so who are some of the early believers and maybe early institutes that said, "Ooh, this is actually useful. I want a bunch of high school students contributing to our science project." So I think both of you can answer this. So Nouf, maybe you can speak to who are some of the early researchers who said, "Yeah, sure, I'll get high school students to contribute to the samples."
I think before the researchers, I need to give credit to he used to be my boss. He's not with us anymore. His name is David McLennan. He did not, I mean, he believed in this wholeheartedly without even understanding what I was telling him. And if you work with me, you have to have a lot of patience, because I blabber a lot and I kind of extend whatever project I have to, like when I'm trying to pitch a project. So he was incredibly supportive, incredibly patient. And he was probably one of the first early believers in this project. So I have to give him credit for that. And the team members, I think, all of the researchers that we've spoken to, we have some that are on the call right now that, we couldn't have been able to do this without them. They didn't even question what we were doing. They immediately jumped on it. And you need to understand, we're working for an academic institute, right? They have different metrics of what they like. They have publications. Some of them are like working to try and get on tenure tracks and stuff like that. So for them to have to put time aside with us to work on an outreach project that we don't know if there's an appetite for. I mean, research outreach here in the UAE is a very new concept. It's not, even science communication, it's like still, it's kind of working itself in the ecosystem. So 100% the researchers that we're working with. And there are some I have a couple of friends that work, that don't work for NYU. We have people from like Dubai Future Foundation, who immediately when they heard about this, the project, they were one of the first people that were like, as soon as you start rolling this out, let us know. We might do booths in the malls. We might be, we want to be able to contribute to this. So there are so many people really that are really, I mean, it puts the pressure on us because we're like, we really wish that, like, we hope we're delivering this the way we're living up to the promise. Yeah. But yeah, those are the people that come to mind. I think there's just too many people to count right now. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Rawdha, do you have any sort of that come to mind?
Who come to mind are like our research centers and our researchers and our faculty members who, ever since we started our Citizen Researcher Initiative in 2018, where we first started talking about this initiative, showed interest and wanted to participate. So we actually have a digital library of citizen researcher projects from all of these researchers and faculty members. So I think they were some of the early believers where they showed interest, not only showed interest, but wanted to take part as well.
So just for the people listening, what are some of these projects? Like you mentioned the soil, like bug searchers. What are some of the other ones? Just because I think people listening have no idea what the projects may be. So yeah, could you just, Rawdha, if you keep on going, and then we'll have Nouf jump in as well. What are some of the actual projects?
Right, so we're actually working with the centers directly, and they're taking the lead in developing their research studies and turning them into research projects. So that's how we approach it. We take existing research studies and see if they're suitable to be turned into citizen researcher projects. And so some of the people we are working with, we're working directly with the Center of Sea Level Changes, and they have their project called Future Coastal Changes. And the way they're approaching their project is that they would like to develop an application that they would like to launch for people to download. And so the process is the following. We'd ask people to go to certain places in the UAE and include their geographical location, which would help the research team gain a better understanding of projections, of future projections of coastal rising. So the main purpose of the center is to understand sea level risings, and they're also focusing in the UAE. So this app will help them gain a better understanding, a better visualization of the sea level risings in the UAE. So participants would contribute to that data and help the research team gain a better understanding of where the UAE currently is and where the UAE is heading in terms of sea level rising. So that's one project. Nouf, I know you would like to talk about one of the other projects, I'm sure.
Yeah, go for it.
There's one I really like, but I also don't understand very well. So I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm probably going to butcher this. And if the researchers watch this, they're probably like face palming right now. There's a group of astrophysicists that are working on, I don't know, some people call it blazars, other people pronounce it blazars, but they're essentially they're like those ginormous, like enormous energetic objects. They're galaxies, active galaxies, that are activated or powered by black hole. Now, what's interesting about this project, what I like about it, so far there are around 6,000 blazars that have been discovered. And what we want to do with the Citizen Researcher Project is using machine learning, and it's really complicated. The tech behind it is complicated, and it's a work in progress. So they're working on it. Is to help citizen researchers, or to kind of ask citizen researchers to help us identify more. Now, why this is important, why those blazars have some kind of impact, is because if you look at a picture, there's a really cool picture. If you Google it, it's this really cool picture of this active galaxy, and there's a beam of light that shoots right through Earth. And basically this beam of light, this, what's it called? There's definitely a scientific name for this. I am so sorry, you guys. But anyways, this beam of light basically has all those different cosmic rays in it, like gamma rays and other cosmic rays. Why this is also important, and this is, pay attention, because this is where the interdisciplinary part comes in, right? When I was trying to get them to kind of unpack this even more, I'm like, yeah, but why do I care? Why do I care about gamma rays hitting the Earth? Like, what does that even mean? Outside some Marvel movie or science fiction movie, what does it mean? Is it going to give me superpowers? Like, what is going on? And they were telling me that some of the technologies right now, because gamma rays and other cosmic rays are one of the oldest particles, they're right now, as you're sitting, it's actually hitting you. You've got gamma rays hitting you or going through you. They are being used, and like archaeologists are using it, for example, to peek into hidden chambers in the pyramids and study history. So through history and archaeology, like we're able to access parts of history that we weren't, without having to take apart the pyramids, for example, and study basically how the chambers look like, and render them in models outside using technology, using AI. So for me, this is a great example of like a really complicated scientific, esoteric research that can very easily be not easily, but can be interpreted and adapted to become a simple citizen science project. And this is the kind of impact that you're doing. So the more blazars we discover, the more sources of gamma rays we discover, and that's how, when we use cosmic ray detectors to be able to detect that and use it to discover hidden chambers and pyramids, which I think is super cool.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. So if you were to explain your project in phases, what are the sort of phases that you've gone through from conception to actual implementation, and where are you right now? Nouf, why don't
I'll let Rawdha take this because she took the lead on this, and she deserves to talk about this more.
Yeah, so you've talked a lot about the planning, but where are you now in terms of the actual implementation?
So currently we're developing these projects in collaboration with the research centers. And so they're doing the brunt of the work, where they're actually designing their projects for public participation. So initially we reach out to these faculty members, and they only have their research studies, and they're interested in opening up their research to members of the public. But the question here is, how do we do that? What's the process? What's the process going to look like? And so it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort to develop and design their research studies and to actually turn them into public participation projects. Because the key here, like Nouf mentioned, is that we take really technical information, really complex information, and we're trying to make it seem as straightforward and as simple as possible, because we are reaching out to a large group of people. And ideally for these projects, we want to reach to as many people as possible if we're gonna reach that goal of accelerating research. And so it's a challenge as well to turn something so complex and make it simple. So one of the tests that we do is, can you tell me what your project is about? And if I'm able to understand it, that's you're in the right direction, because it means that you were able to kind of communicate it in a way that's simple and straightforward. And that's always key with projects that we're opening up for public participation. And in terms of phases, one of the things that we focus on is the step-by-step process. So what we call a protocol, which we ask participants to follow. And we want to ensure that that process is as simple and as straightforward as possible. So that's where we are right now, developing those projects to making them open for public participation. So that can be in a number of ways. So the Sea Level Rising project, for example, is developing an application. The Blazar project is developing a website. And that takes a couple of months. And after that, we prototype it before we launch it. So that's one of the learning lessons that we learned from trialing Bugfighter, is that prototyping it would be good to see where there are areas for error, so that we can mitigate that, especially when we're asking participants to contribute to the process. We're asking them to commit their time to kind of either collect data or analyze data. So we want to ensure that whatever they're contributing is actually useful and can be used towards the research. And that's where prototyping becomes important, because we make sure that this process is as fail-proof as possible, and is we mitigate as much of the potential errors as possible. After that, we launch it and we open it up to members of the public for their contribution.
So perfect. Nouf, if you can actually, this is, relates to that. So how do you avoid scope drift for this type of project? How do you avoid this turning into an app development project? Or how do you turn this into like, oh, we're helping all these different centers and institutes think about communication, or have it turn into like a civic activation project? Like how do you keep this actually, keep this centered on civic activation, generating data for research?
That's a good question, and that's what we're trying to figure out. So this is going to be interesting for us once we actually launch the project. So one thing that we've talked about is we need to keep checking in. We need to, so in the first phase, obviously, like Rawdha said, after the prototyping, and then having the projects on the website and available for people to participate in. What we're hoping to do is we're going to give it like a month or 2 months and evaluate, trying to collect the data, see if our data management processes are they're robust. Are we sending out the right message? Are we articulating what we're trying to do in an effective way? But I think we're going to figure that out, I think, in the first 2 or 3 months. One thing we've been thinking about doing is we want to continue putting educational material on as well, and kind of getting feedback from the citizen researchers, so they're involved the whole time and not just we're using you to come to help us do our research. So it could be something like, I might reach out to Mikey and go like, can we have another Africa session? So we'll talk about a certain project, for example. Sure. But there are certain ways, there's other ways that we're doing this. The other thing is we're developing libraries on the side. So it's not just about launching the projects on the website, but we're continuing to talk to researchers for potential projects on the side. So and again, we want to make sure that it's not just science. So for example, we've got David Risley on the call. So he's someone that we want to talk to about, and I know that you've had him in an interview before, and his through Digital Humanities, that's a wonderful platform to try and create a citizen researcher project with. And it's through just by diversifying the disciplines that we're putting out there, we'll learn a lot more about what to do and what not to do, and make sure that our vision for it and our purpose and our intention for it remain the same. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit. There is really no after with this project yet, but some of the questions we can preempt a little bit. So knowing what you know now, if you could have kicked this project off over again, what do you think you would have planned for to be able to be a little more successful in the kickoff?
Well, we would have really planned for a pandemic if we knew that this was going to happen.
So
maybe get our
toilet paper and masks.
That's probably the first thing we do. Like stock up on toilet paper.
Yeah.
Have our first citizen researcher project on how to create the vaccine for COVID. No, I think one of the things that we would have packed better for, there was an ever-changing timelines that we're having. I think we would have been a little bit more vigilant with our timelines. I mean, some things were, inevitable. I mean, COVID is COVID. There are certain things like scoping out, for example, our testbed project with the bug fighter. It was unfortunate that we weren't able to do it, but we still got hope that we could do that. We would have talked to a lot more people. I think we were very protective of the project to start with. I don't think we talked with enough people outside the disciplines to try and get some feedback. So I think about this, I think about if we met you, for example, before and, it had this conversation, it might have informed the way that we designed Citizen Researcher Project. If we talked to people outside different disciplines, it might have been different.
Sure.
Yeah, I think those are a couple of things that,
okay,
would have done.
So this is for both of you, but maybe Rawdha, if we can start with you. So how do you quantify achievement? What does success look like? How many kids, how many data points, how many projects? Yeah, go for it.
I think I would quantify achievement as soon as we have projects up and running on our website. I think that would be one goal. And like if we have that completed, that would be one way of looking at it from an achievement perspective. And then almost immediately, we would love to have participants take part and contribute and make sure that the process is viable throughout, and that at the end that whatever participants contributed would actually be used towards the research and creating the cycle where we create this mutual benefit, where both participants enjoy their citizen researcher experience and learn from it, and the research team see an acceleration in their research. And finally, we tie that back to the participants where they get updates on the project's progress, whereby we let them know that, hey, your participation made that impact to the research project, and we keep them updated. So I think those three things would I think for me would be what success would look like, and would make me proud of the whole initiative.
Yeah.
I would add to that as well. I think one thing we'd like to see from this as well is other initiatives starting that are similar to this. I don't think that this should be just an NYU thing. To your point about civic duty and connecting people and everything, I think I would definitely want one of the success indicators for me would be to see other, not just higher education institute, but any other citizen researchers / citizen science, citizen social science, citizen humanities projects pop out of somewhere. Maybe our citizen researchers become ambassadors for future projects as well. So that would make me very proud.
So this is something that we think about with Africa a lot, is like, what are sort of the scene changes that we are trying to observe for in this movement that we're trying to build. So I would imagine that anything that has the word citizen in it, like what are you hoping to actually see amongst the participants? Forget the projects for a second. How do you actually think about what success looks like when you're actually looking at the participants themselves? So if in 20 years, when Citizen Researcher is celebrating its 20th anniversary, what are sort of the benchmarks that you're like, this moved this needle? We can observe that in X, Y, Z ways. What do you think? What are some of the things that come to mind?
I think when I think about this, I think about different age groups as well. Like I think about the different target groups. So for, if I'm thinking about younger generation, if this was, if the projects are targeted towards high school students, I'd love to see that a citizens researcher project that they were involved in implement or informed their careers going forward, that they were inspired to become researchers because of this. On the other end of the spectrum, for example, for professionals or amateurs that are, older or in different disciplines, I'd like to see them give talks about this. I mean, a lot of the TED Talks that we listen to are not that advocate for citizen science, weren't really scientists. They were normal people with, amateurs with different backgrounds who were interested in, for example, astronomy, and are able to talk about this and are able to create initiatives around this or just advocate for the research itself. Another thing would be, and I know this is a really, I mean, it's not everything, but I'd like to see policy being informed. I'd like to see scientific policy or government policy, science policy in governments informed by citizen researcher projects. Maybe someone who has some kind of influence on informing science policy in a country, creating, that would lead to creating equity, for example, or creating, being able to address really sensitive issues across the globe, and citizen researcher being a platform for them to be able to do that. So those are more of kind of the global, more like the ambitious, aspirations that I have for this initiative. But hopefully,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question is just what's next?
Rawdha, do you want to take this?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So in terms of what's next, definitely launching those projects and having people participate in them. Yeah. And Nouf mentioned that educational tab as well. So putting some videos and blog posts on research. So not only having people participate in research, but letting people know about the existing research that's happening in NYUAD, and definitely having people participate in the research. I think that's a big one in terms of next steps.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's start with our first question. Comes from David, who I'm going to unmute 1 second.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hear you perfectly.
Perfect, great. So thank you so much. It was such an interesting conversation. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and I know we're going to actually have a meeting to talk about this next week, so I'm sure we'll get to talk about it then, but you talked about high school students, and I was thinking, do you have any other ideas for other demographics in particular, for citizen research? Because the UAE is such a diverse society with so many different kinds of people, and I'm just curious to what you're thinking about for the different publics, the different audiences for this kind of work. Thanks.
Thanks, David. And yes, we will talk about this next time. But no, that's a good question. I think when we mention high school students, it's because we work with them quite a bit. And high school students are actually a really nice controlled environment for us to test projects with. So it's always good to kind of test it with high school. But yes, we do. We want to target other demographics. It really depends on the project. And it really depends on how complex the project is. So there are some projects that there are some entities, for example. So I mentioned Dubai Future Foundation. There's, for example, the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technologies has a lot of advanced sciences, has a lot of different initiatives and different groups of people that are working on different things that we would like to kind of leverage their help in trying to expand our reach for them. The demographic will really depend on the project. So for example, I'm assuming like if it's a project around, let's say a humanities project that requires, for example, annotation or translation of text, we would be targeting amateurs, not amateurs, people that are interested in that from different, say, there's the Cultural Foundation, there's the Culture Foundation. I think there's another one in Dubai that's really escaping me. I can't remember what it is, but of course it's going to be targeted depending on the interest of the people that are going to do it. We're trying not to limit it though. I mean, on the website, we usually, once we develop this website and we start putting the projects on, we're going to put there that, not preferred, but the target audience, if it was specific, would be ages this for that. But we want to avoid doing that just because we know that there might be people of different, there might be even younger people that are quite skilled in, let's say, software design or computer science or AI or something like that, that might be interested in a much more complicated project. So it's really going to depend on the discipline.
Great. Okay. Thanks, David. So for those of you who can't see the screen, if you're interested in learning more about Citizen Researcher, you can go and just type in Google NYUAD Citizen Researcher, and you will find the website. Rawdha and Nouf, thank you so much for, oh, we have one more question. I can hear you. Go for it.
Okay. So in the US, oftentimes we have programs in the research world that are developed specifically to target middle school students. And obviously citizen research is going to be significantly different than those specific programs, but is there any plan to try and include a slightly younger demographic? Because at that age, we kind of sort of do have a lot more influence on getting them interested in STEAM fields to get them into, so that they can basically inform their high school education in what they want to choose before they get to college.
That's a really good question. Thank you so much. In terms of the demographic as well, like, and that's something Nouf also talks about as well, like that particular age group, middle school students, is when we want to kind of reach out to them, because that's when they become really interested. That's the age where you can get them to become interested in something and they follow up with it in middle school or like high school and so on. But with Citizen Researcher, we open it up to a lot of demographics. So we open it up to parents, we open it up to high school students, college students, adults. So in terms of middle school students and even younger, they would have the help of their parents as well. So it would be like a family kind of project where they'd participate in that. And that's something we encourage as well. And that's something that's going to be on our website, is that with the younger students, especially with websites and everything, because there is that law that if you're under the age of 13, you need to have parents as well to view and mentor the process. So that's a demographic there as well. And hopefully we'd be reaching that by including parents there as well. But yeah, Nouf, if you want to add to that.
No, it's just, yeah, I just wanted to add that that's a good question, because also researchers found that that's also the age that they lose interest in science, and they lose interest in
especially girls
getting into same. Yeah, especially I mean, not here, not in the Middle East, surprisingly, but we can talk about that later. For some reason, a lot more girls get into STEM in the Middle East, or at least I know in the UAE for sure. But you're right, in the States, I think there a lot of girls lose interest. So that they found, a lot of researchers found that that's the age where they lose interest. Now, COVID allowing, we would love to be able to do this with the middle school students specifically. But like Rawdha said, I think the way that we're trying to pivot towards now with the whole like COVID situation, and because a lot of we anticipate that this whole digital world is not going to go away anytime soon. Involving the parents is the way that we'd like to, it's basically the way that we would probably be targeting students at that age, to try and incentivize. So then they can do that in their own homes. They can do that. It becomes part of their life and not just that's another thing that we want to avoid, the whole one unidirection workshop, the same thing that we've been doing so far. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Holly. Okay, with that said, we're going to wrap up. Rawdha and Nouf, thanks so much for joining us. If anyone's interested in reaching out, take a look online and you'll be able to find them. A lot of really cool, exciting stuff, so I'm glad that we got to explore it together. Okay, everybody, we'll be back next week with a bunch more events. Go to africa.com for all that information. And this will be on the podcast and YouTube page in a few days, so you can forward it to all those folks who missed this. Rawdha, Nouf, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, Mike.